I was inspired by my last video to talk about experiencing something new. That can happen with anything. Maybe you read a great manga like Berserk and wanted to lose your memory, not to read it again, but to get it out of your head. Or maybe you watched a movie like Fight Club and hoped you can forget the major twist about it and watch the movie all over again. New experiences can leave a major impression. And since I grew up playing video games, I've had my fair share of great games I can never relive the experience of, and of course I had games that were terrible despite offering something new. If you played one Call of Duty, then you pretty much played them all. Even Battlefield. Sure, they add something new here and there, but it's all the same in my mind. Run and gun and hope your KD doesn't go in the negative. But FPS games aren't the only thing that can be repetitive. Most platformers, adventure, or even horror games rarely offer something new. Far Cry games are kind of the same, even down to the repetitive nature of capturing towers to reveal more of the map. But recently they changed that to capturing campsites and completely abandoned the tower capture. It's been memed enough and criticized enough that they removed it. So should you go out of your way to try a new genre of games just to have a new experience? That's what I'm here to tell you, because I will be going through some games that give something new, from story, or game mechanic, or even visuals. And there will be spoilers to a lot of games, so as always, if you plan to play some of them, avoid their sections. And don't forget to like and subscribe, and enjoy the video. Start this video with games that provided a unique storyline, which means that while their gameplay can seem similar to other games, the unique story they offer puts them in this category. And the first game we're going to talk about is Bully recently came out in 2006 and was criticized before its release for glorifying bullying. Parents and teachers raised this concern by mentioning Rockstar's previous game, like San Andreas and Manhunt, but it did not cancel or affect the game sales. The name of the game was changed to Canis Canem Edit for the European release, which is Latin for dog eat dog. And in 2008, the Scholarship Edition was released, which offered more classes and side quests other than what was in the original. The story of Bully stars Jimmy Hopkins, a 15-year-old delinquent who gets sent to one of the toughest schools in the country by the name of Bulworth Academy. After he got expelled from so many schools, and his mother ended up marrying an older gentleman and leaving her son for her honeymoon. However, Jimmy wanted to turn over a new leaf, wanting to be left alone and out of trouble. But before he enters the boys' dorm, he gets picked on by a group of guys and defends himself. Then Russell comes out of the dorm, who happens to be the leader of the guys in white button-down shirts, and he is way too strong and too tall and too dumb, but he's got a good heart. After entering the dorm, you meet Gary, and he offers to be your friend. He takes you around the school, introduces you to different cliques in the game. The greasers, who hang out by the auto shop, the preppies, who own the only two-story dorm and a greenhouse, the jocks, who are always at the gym, and the nerds who stay in the library. This is one of my favorite scenes, apart from the one where Pete gets kicked in the balls. The thing about Gary is throughout the game, and almost every mission of his, he mentions taking over the school. And by the ending of chapter 1, you realize that Gary was never a friend, just a guy who manipulated you into doing his bidding. However, you gain Russell as a true friend, and that's what's important. The rest of the chapters boils down to Jimmy turning off fires and taking on the leaders of every clique and getting everyone on the same page, making him the most popular and loved or feared person in the school. Then things started going insane. The gym gets burned down, the library gets infested with rats, and the preppies get their boxing trophies stolen, and the greasers lose their leader Johnny. And everyone blames Jimmy, and suddenly, everyone hates you. Even Algernon with his pea stain at this point is more popular than you. Then you learn that there is another part of Bulworth where the clique called the Townies hang out in. These guys are all kids who got expelled from the school for unfair reasons, or Mr. Burton tried to sleep with one of them. Gary manipulated the Townies leader and convinced him to do those things and blame Jimmy. Despite the fact Jimmy tried his best to prove his innocence, the damage was done and no one liked him. At the end of the game, Gary gets what he wanted, and he has caused complete chaos in the school. This resulted in an all-out war where you had to defeat everyone again with the help of Russell and the Townies. After defeating Gary, you are rewarded with Chapter 6, Endless Summer, where you are free to roam the school and town or finish any classes or collect anything you missed. The thing I loved about the classes is that every subject grants different rewards. In the chemistry class, if you manage to finish 5 classes, you'll be able to equip yourself with a full inventory of smoke bombs, firecrackers, itchin powder, and restock your ammo. In the English class, the better you do, the more charisma you have, which will result in you getting away with petty crimes or getting out of trouble without fighting. Another factor I enjoyed was the small details in the game. As time passes and you go through different seasons, you see the game add in Halloween decorations or Christmas decorations, or see the students wearing different types of clothes for the weather that they're having. So if it's cold, some people will shiver, some noses will be red, and it's just a nice detail to look at. And finally, we have the healing factor in the game, where if you want to refill your health bar, you can drink sodas, or you can kiss a number of girls or boys, whichever way you decide to swing, and that would be a way to replenish your health. Most of the time, I never needed it, because in art class, if you successfully finish 5 classes, you'll be getting a bonus health bar up to 200%, and healing won't be much of a hassle in the game. However, despite Rockstar releasing a fantastic game like Bully, I don't believe they will ever do a remake or even a sequel. Even the support for the game on Windows 10 has completely been abandoned. Modders have decided to take things into their own hand, and the silent patch existed because the game doesn't have support anymore. But I won't deny the fact that Rockstar has released other great games like Grand Theft Auto, Red Dead Redemption, Manhunt, and my absolute favorite game based on a movie, The Warriors. But most of the games I mentioned from them can be predictable. The main character wins at the end, except my poor boy Arthur. I think we all lost there. The next game we have on the list gave you an unexpected twist. So let's talk about Shadow of the Colossus was released in 2005 and had a remaster in 2010 and a remake in 2018. The game itself offers a unique gameplay style, but it's not the reason why it's here. The story talks about Wander, a young man accompanied by his loyal horse Agro to revive a maiden who's said to have had a cursed destiny and was sacrificed, named Mono. The game takes place in a forbidden land where Wander took Mono to the temple of worship in hopes of reviving her. However, he gets attacked by shadowy figures, which are easily defeated thanks to the weapon he carries. This caused a disembodied entity to speak to him named Dorman, and it possesses the power to revive the dead. Dorman is shocked that Wander is carrying such an ancient and powerful weapon. Wander asks Dorman to return Mono's spirit, and the entity agrees under the condition that he uses that sword to slay the 16 colossi in the world. Desperate to revive Mono, he agrees and takes Agro and travels this forbidden land, killing one giant at a time. The part I enjoyed most about the game was the fact that each giant has different ways to kill them. Some require you to climb up to their head, others require a bow and arrow, and some just need a stab in the foot. Each idol you kill will result in a dark fragment entering your body, causing you to pass out and return to the temple, each time with a shadowy figure looming over you that will increase in numbers. As these fragments enter your body, your appearance will begin to alter. Your skin will be paler, your hair will be darker, and dark veins will appear on your face, and finally, horns out of your head. Near the ending of the game, after you manage to take down all 16 colossi, Lord Emon, who recognizes Wander as the man who stole the ancient sword and sees that he has become possessed, he explains that Wander has been used to release the power of Dorman, an evil entity that was locked away in the shrine and had its power spread across 16 idols, leaving it weak. He then commands his company to kill Wander as he is trying to reach Mono. He is stabbed through the chest, and as he is dying, Dorman takes his body and begins killing the people around. Lord Emon manages to take the sword and throws it inside a small pool at the back of the shrine, causing a tornado that begins to suck in Dorman. You try to struggle as the shadowy figure of Dorman leaving your lifeless body, but to no avail. Dorman is locked away in the shrine, and Lord Emon takes his men and leave through the only bridge as it's collapsing. Afterwards, Mono's spirit returns to her body, and she awakens from her long slumber as Agro walks into the shrine with a broken leg. She heads to the pool and finds a small child with horns crying, and she carries it, and that's the ending of the game. So my question here is, if it is at all possible to revive the dead, would you doom yourself and the world to unleash potential evil to get the person you love back? I'm a hopeful fool, and I believe a lot of people would say no, which is why I think this game provided such a twist to the story. If people knew that these giants weren't actually evil, but were protecting the world, then perhaps no one would kill them. I mean, look at them, they're kinda cute. But you don't actually need words to tell a story, and the next game does that very well. Hollow Knight was released in 2017 by the independent developers Team Cherry. The difficult part about the story of the game is the fact that there is no spoken dialogue, so most of the game lore is by written text. You play as the Knight, a genderless vessel created by the Pale King and the White Lady, meant to protect Hollow Nest from an infection that caused hundreds of deaths on bugs. The way this sickness takes hold is in two stages. First one being in your dreams. It uses the bug's desires and plants ideas or false hope until they become fully enslaved. The second stage is physical. Depending on how far the infection has gone, orange splatter will release from the bug's body on each hit it receives. Everyone is a bug, by the way. I feel like I should establish that early on before any confusion. This infection was caused by the Radiance, an entity that was once worshipped and beloved until the arrival of the Pale King. With the entity losing its followers, it started infecting anyone it could. The king devised a plan to create these vessels in the abyss with void inside of them, making them unable to speak or think or have any free will at all. The king had attempted to lock away the infection inside a temple. However, it managed to escape and create the Dreamers, who are sealing the door and protecting the source of the infection. So it's believed that your character escaped the abyss, and your goal is to remove the seal off the door by killing the Dreamers, and upon your success, you can finally confront the Hollow Knight, and depending on your actions throughout the game, there could be multiple endings. If you didn't find the Void Heart and you managed to defeat the Hollow Knight, you will absorb the infection into you, and the game will end, and you will have an infected menu screen. If you manage to find the Void Heart and defeat the Knight, near the end of the fight, Hornet, who is a mysterious character, helps you by restraining the Hollow, and if you wait too long, then the Hollow breaks free, knocking Hornet down, and after defeating them again, the ending continues as the previous one, with Hornet's mask on the seal. For the third ending, you require the Void Heart and the Awoken Dream Nail, where you will send the Hollow to the Dream Radiance, where they will turn into a shade and help you to purge the infection and possibly killing the Knight in the process. This unlocks the Void menu style. There are also Passing of Age, Delicate Flower, and Embrace the Void. Almost all of these endings leave an open interpretation, which is more than fair considering that this game is extremely good. Outside of my own experience with it, it was well received, which I always love to see when it comes to independent developers. While massive companies rely on massive budgets for marketing, it's amazing seeing small teams achieve what huge companies like Sony or Ubisoft fail to do a number of times. And you remember Concord? Fucking crazy time we're living. Out of all the terrible Walking Dead games that were released, only two, in my opinion, do the world justice: Satan Sinners and the Telltale series. Season 1 of Telltale Walking Dead was released in 2012. The good days of Call Me Maybe, Gangnam Style, and Coney. The first episode introduces us to Lee, a man who was convicted of murder and was being transported when an untimely zombie walks out onto the road and derails the trip. Lee wakes up after the accident with an injured leg and finds the cop dead and turned. This was kind of established later in the show that every human in this world is infected, so it doesn't matter if you are bitten or not. The comic never really expanded why this was a thing, but the cop wasn't bitten as far as I know. After killing the cop, Lee spots a witness from afar away. He calls out for help, but the figure runs away. Lee begins to make his way in the same direction and finds more zombies are chasing him. He jumps a fence and goes inside a house. And this is something I enjoy about post-apocalyptic games, is when the writers make backstories to the environment. The house is in disarray. Bookshelves are flipped, there's blood everywhere, and the answering machine has 3 messages. The first one is calm, and it's a woman talking about how a crazy person attacked her husband, and that they're staying for an extra day. The next one sounds a lot more worried, and requesting Sandra to take Clementine and leave Atlanta. The third one, which made me feel sad, is this.
Message 3, left at 6:51 a.m.
Clementine, baby. If you can hear this, call the police. That's 911. We love you. We love you. We love you.
You search the house and find a walkie-talkie, and a little girl speaks to you. You can tell from the jump that Lee is concerned for her well-being, but you do get attacked by a zombie and Clementine comes to the rescue. From this point on, you and Clem venture together, which means every action you take, every dialogue choice will affect how people feel about you and how the game will go. Now, this isn't a new mechanic by any means, but it does a very good job in making you weigh your options before deciding. Like if you side with the racist guy and Kenny ends up hating your guts, which by the way you shouldn't do because A, he's racist, and B, never betrayed Kenny, man, he's too good. The end of the game is also heartbreaking. The game came out 10 years ago and it still holds water today, and personally speaking, I believe that it is kind of the perfect game for a series to start off in. They did also release 2 more seasons with Clementine, and while I do love her a lot and appreciate her character development, the 2 other seasons are lacking in a lot of ways compared to the first one. Same thing with the show. It should have ended a long time ago, but now it's just a money farm for AMC and I can never watch it again. Next section. Besides offering a story that may or may not have been told before, the games in this section offer a new mechanic, maybe a new way to heal and it's relevant to the game. Maybe it spawns a new genre of video games. And to start this list off, we're going to talk about Inscryption. Roguelike deck building games are some of my favorites. I get to enjoy barely reaching the end and starting all over again. But since I stumbled on Slay the Spire, Inscryption, Balatro, I became infatuated with the genre. Could be because I'm a masochist and on a 300-day edging streak, but we aren't really here to talk about my kinks. I want to focus on Inscryption since it was the game that got me into this genre. The game was released in 2021 by Daniel Mullins, and you play it through the pre-existing experience of Luke Carter, who happens to be a YouTuber/streamer who purchased a pack of cards from a garage sale. After finding that one of the cards has coordinates on it, he travels to the location and finds a floppy disk with the game Inscryption on it. He begins his investigation into the publishers and company, but they simply tell him that the game doesn't exist. And it never has. Despite them denying the existence of it, they are demanding for the disc back and even sending people to Luke's house and threatening legal action. Most of the footage left by Luke are corrupted, and one of the videos uploaded to YouTube had a binary code in the description, which I translated, and it simply says, "It corrupts us all." Every time you lose in the game, your photo will be taken by the game master known as Leshy. Leshy is a deity in Slavic mythology, by the way. Once a photo is taken, that character will be trapped in the cards. So the second time you lose, the camera will be on the floor next to you, but it will be without film. There are 3 cards that speak to you: the Stout, Stinkbug, and the Wolf. With their help, you can find some film and capture Leshy in a photo in order to win. Something I found strange in the game was the fact that there is no new game button, only continue. That's because when you beat the game, this button will show and the game shifts its tone drastically. Unlike Slay the Spire, Inscryption allows the player to move around and solve puzzles to help them on their mission, which is another reason why I wanted to focus on this game specifically. It was well received from players with over 100,000 overwhelming positive reviews on Steam, so in case you wanted an introduction to the genre of deck building roguelike games, you can't really go wrong with any of them, though I do like Inscryption a lot. The first time I ever felt responsibility was when I owned a Tamagotchi and I had to keep the fucker alive. So imagine that, but on a larger scale. When it comes to life simulation games, The Sims is the biggest name out there. Released in 2000, the game went through different themes. You get to control and create a variety of people for your world. You can develop relationships, make enemies, or make babies and keep them alive. That last part is optional. You can even create different storylines and challenges. And when it comes to creativity, no one does it better than the Sim players. With insane challenges like 100 babies, rags to riches, some people even recreate TV shows like Big Brother and The Bachelor, and some roleplay as a Black Widow, marrying a wealthy man, draining them, and eventually ending them. My personal favorite was Sims Herbs. It's not really canon to the Sims timeline, but the Black Eyed Peas are in the game, and even provided some music that was translated to Simlish, which is an insane language that was created by Will Wright specifically for the Sims game. In 1999, Will lost his home in the Oakland fire, which inspired him to create a virtual dollhouse. When he initially presented the idea to Maxis, they didn't provide much support, but gave enough to not take the idea anywhere. In 1997, EA bought Maxis and saw that Sims could be a huge success, and it actually was. Sims is the best-selling game series from 36 to 50 million units, and even modders were selling packs and offering subscriptions for newer things. EA tried stopping this, but when faced with backlash, they made changes to make sure that both modders and the community are getting what they want. Will Wright commented on The Sims by saying that it was meant to be satire for the US consumer culture, and he wasn't wrong considering that The Sims was featured in the Guinness World Records for most expensive packs in video games. This coupled with the fact that Sims 4 only recently became free but has a ridiculous amount of packs and probably releasing more since the 4th installment seems to be their last one. In terms of storyline of The Sims, there are tasks and missions you can do, but when I decided to stream the game, people just told me to create my own or do challenges or just make a family. I have no idea what Sims story is. I am guessing you try to keep your character alive, just like you're trying to keep yourself alive. I don't know, simulation games have been a thing for a long time. I remember going to an arcade and pretending to ride a bike or shoot monsters in the face with a fake gun. But let's not deny the fact that Sims was the reason why simulation video games are so popular. While I am aware that Little Computer People was the first Sims technically, but by Y2K, the real Sims was the genre-defining game. Doesn't mean it's the first, but it does mean it's the best. Next game. This is probably the most upsetting mechanic in video game history. Not only did Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War provide an okay story, they also introduced the Nemesis system, where if you die to a foot soldier, that soldier has a chance to move up in the ranks and improve their skills, even going as far as challenging a captain for their position. Or if you manage to kill an orc and stab them in the eye, or shoot them with an arrow, they have a chance to return and have a missing eye or be riddled with arrows. The system itself is incredible, and because Warner Brothers knew that it could take away customers from them, they patented the system and never released another game with it. The story of Middle-earth and playstyle is rather simple. You can use stealth, but if you manage to get into a rhythm, then the combat is more fun than sneaking around. There is also the ability to brainwash an orc into working for you. With this strategic move, you can actually kill the other orcs in the ranks until the undercover orc becomes captain and helps you out later on. I should also note that some of the pre-existing captains are a bit more resistant to brainwashing, so starting low and working your way up is much easier. I will say that I was never into this type of world. The whole medieval and orcs, it's never been my thing that I go for. Even its lore never drawn me to it. It was mostly the new system in combat. The open world aspect of it was also quite fun, plus grinding the game out and unlocking towers was something I enjoyed while I wasn't burnt out from the Far Cry towers. And there are plenty of references and Easter eggs to find, like Gollum, who scared the shit out of me at first, but was delighted to see him. But in terms of story, and from what I can gather online, people seem to be disappointed with how it ends. Some even stopped playing the game and restarted it after a certain point. I myself never finished the game. Halfway through, I decided I'm just gonna watch how it ends on YouTube. Granted, I should probably give it a fair chance in the future when I'm more drawn to the story, but I simply prefer the Nemesis system be available for everyone so more developers can create their own worlds and storyline. They could have created a new genre like the Souls games, but alas, Warner Brothers had to ruin it. Next game. A lot of games try to send subliminal messages to the player. Fallout tells us that war never changes. Not much of subliminal, he literally says it out loud. Or Super Mario Galaxy. I don't think I need to explain that one, Mr. Gay. But Before Your Eyes sends a bit more than what other games try to get the player to understand. The game revolves around the mechanic of time. Some games allow you to rewind. However, this game, time only moves forward, and it relies on your blinking. If you have a camera, then it tracks your eyes, and every time you blink, the game moves forward. You can play this game with a mouse and click every time you blink, but it defeats the purpose of the game. It talks about a brilliant artist named Benjamin Bryan. Born to loving parents, he lived in a small town near the sea. And the game starts off with you on a boat talking to a wolf surrounded by seagulls. He explains to you that he's taking you to the tower where if your life story is good enough, then he gets paid well and you get to spend your time in a a better place than adrift at sea as a spirit. So you begin to go through your life, the ups and downs you had as an artist. You tried being a piano player at some point since your mother was a composer, and she taught you well enough to audition for a prestigious school. You end up failing that dream, and she blames herself for pushing you too hard. At 11 years old, you got sick and rediscovered your love for drawing and painting, and eventually became a world-renowned artist. And as you get older, you lose your mother and have a final art show, and the wolf is ecstatic, happy he found the jackpot. Then the seagulls begin yelling out liar. He tells you that these aren't regular gulls. They were spirits who lied about their life in hopes of having a good story, or the narrator failed to retell it. Then on the final stretch, he asks you to tell him your life story again, and this time, no skipping details. This is where you learn that Benny's illness was far worse than what the first story made it seem to be. Slightly before his illness, his grandfather died, and he owned a typewriter. So when Benjamin fell sick, his mother asked him to write his life story. So Benjamin wrote the story he told the wolf. But it was a fantasy he wanted to live. He was too worried that he hadn't lived enough, that he will never get to live up to his mother's expectations of him, that he won't get to display his art. So he died young with dreams of becoming something more. That's the message Before Your Eyes tries to deliver. And no matter what happens, life will move forward. If you don't live it, then you'll blink too far and miss it. Next game. The next 4 games you play as a detective. And from the title of this section, you should know that one of these games is great, the other is good, one of them is okay, and one is just terrible. This is based on my personal opinion, but after I tell you about them, you'll most likely agree. Let's start with what I consider to be a good detective game. LA Noire was released originally in 2011, and it featured a unique mechanic where you have to find out if a person is lying based on their facial expressions. So you actually have to detect. The story itself is fairly decent. You play as Detective Cole Phelps, a former Marine who returned from World War II a hero and decided to join the Los Angeles Police Department. Started off as a patrol officer, he rose through the ranks by being a good cop and making his way to being a detective and starting off in the traffic department, all the way up to vice, but he later was demoted to arson where the game reaches its end. Despite the fact the game is set in 1947, Cole treated everyone equally, even when it would put him in a less favorable position with people. The same way a lot of soldiers felt after returning from war and seeing the horrors that both sides suffered. However, Cole had several moments of weakness, not only during the war on Sugarloaf Hill, where he wanted to retreat from the enemy despite another battalion still firing their weapons and causing the death of one of his friends, Hank Merrill, but also during his life after the war, where he felt estranged from his wife and sought romance from a different woman. The only thing I dislike about the game is the fact that it takes a bit to get into. It's a slow burner, and messing up is fairly easy if you don't gather enough evidence. I mean, it's the 1940s, you'll eventually close the case as long as you get a confession. It's up to you if you want it to be the right person or not. Now, this next game is just an okay one. It's The Vanishing of Ethan Carter, which is about a 12-year-old who you will never guess the name of or what happened to him. You play as Paul Prespero, a private detective who received letters from Ethan before his disappearance. Spoiler alert. The game is set in an open world where you investigate strange occurrences that involve supernatural events. It seems that Ethan was responsible for releasing a demonic spirit called the Sleeper, and in hopes of appeasing the spirit, Ethan's family decided to sacrifice him, but ended up killing each other and trapping Ethan in a small room. Now, the reason why I think this is just an okay game, it's because it doesn't really wow me with its mechanics or even the story. It's a 4-hour puzzle game, but it does it very well. The graphics are stunning, despite the motion blur giving me motion sickness, and the controls are easy. It builds tension fairly well, and the random bodies around the town made me raise an eyebrow in curiosity. And the ending depends on how much you uncover from the stories left behind by Ethan. So as you build up to the ending, you learn that his brother Travis got possessed by the Sleeper, and his grandfather Ed had to kill him, and it could lead to an ending where you see Ethan vanishing and it would be too late to save him. Or you could eventually find him and realize that you're not even a real person, just a figment of a little boy's imagination in his final moments where his family wanted him dead. It's quite a sad short story that was received very very well. Not to mention that it was the indie studio's first game, The Astronauts. And I'm a huge advocate for indie games, especially 2024, since there was a lot of incredible titles that deserve more recognition. But Disco Elysium is our great game. I mean, I dedicated an entire video for it, and you do play as a detective suffering from memory loss, so you do have a lot to figure out more than just a murder. But the game itself does such an incredible job in terms of writing and performing that I, someone who does not enjoy top-down games at all, loved the experience. All the games I played growing up were either third-person or first-person shooters, so any strategy games, turn-based, top-down, or something that involves a lot of tension and reading strikes out immediately. And that's my own fault. I never really gave these games a chance to show me how great they were, so I just kept playing the games I'm used to and never expanded my horizon. But learning about the developers, their struggles, and how things ended up for them made me upset. Imagine working hard on something for so long and someone comes in and takes it away. I never had an opinion on rich people. I lived by the mantra of live and let live, but in recent times, I have to admit, rich people kinda suck. And yes, they vary. Some rich people are fine, but the wealthy are mostly scum. Even in the game, a man like Everett Clare, who became rich, tries to screw over anyone to make himself richer. Despite his words and what he says about making the common man wealthy, what he requests you to do, apart from it being shady, it's borderline unethical, and he uses the fact that you need a lot of help from him to his advantage. The first time you meet him, he demands you sit in an uncomfortable chair that will cause damage to you, and if you don't do it, then he will not help. This is his way of getting what he wants, and he never asks you to sit in the chair after the first time. Another person in the game is Joyce Messier, who is also rich but doesn't try to screw people over, even tells you about a potential drug trafficking ring. But apart from some rich people are bad, the game is set in a beautiful open world created from scratch with its own rich history, and it allows you to be whatever you like to be. It's why I became an ultra-nationalist woman-hating fascist who's also very racist. Not by choice, but in 2014 I was minding my own business, getting my first ever platinum trophy on Infamous Second Son, until I got recommended a game that I thought had a great concept. Murdered Soul Suspects has you playing as Detective Ronan O'Connor, a criminal turned cop, cause I'm sure ex-felons can just become law enforcement without an issue, set in Salem of all places, and with an expedition dump of the character's past as an intro, which I'll give credit for. The idea of the tattoos telling the life story was actually pretty decent, but you get shoved out of a window by the Bell Killer, who was terrorizing Salem for a while, and Ronan received a tip on where it is, and he went there without calling for backup. Then our fedora-wearing wisecracking detective tries to get back into the building, but he can't, because his soul left his body. So he attempts to get back into it, but the Bell Killer shoots him about 7 times, and this is kind of a cool scene that shows the bullets leaving its mark on the soul. We get another rush scene with my ex-wife, who died by the way, and she tells us that our job isn't done and we aren't safe, so I need to quickly figure out what's keeping my soul on Earth so I can cross the bridge to the afterlife. Then we get another expedition dump by a ghost girl about how the soul thing works. She says whatever my strengths were before I died becomes stronger in this form, and as a detective, I can detect, influence, and read people's minds, and even peek through their eyes to see what they see. The game does this weird thing with its cutscenes. They simulate the idea that you have options and what to say to the people you speak to. So when I was talking to the ghost girl, it switches to a 720p resolution cutscene, but then it switches to a high resolution gameplay, and I'm given options on what to ask. But it doesn't matter because I can ask all the questions. And I feel like I should have been limited on that fact, so it gives the impression that I am missing out on important details. I also feel like they could have just had one long cutscene that isn't interrupted by a white flash and 2-second gameplay where I press a button. The entire game is poorly executed. The combat, or lack thereof, boils down to hide and seek or stealth takedowns. And the detective part of the game is equally unimpressive. You collect clues, you solve the case for the dead sometimes, and work your way to the end of the game. I think this game would have been better if the first few missions involved us getting to know the character, maybe solve a few cases as humans to show that what we can do in our human form is inferior compared to the spirit form. But instead, we get a 5-hour game that feels horribly rushed, and it's not worth the 45 $25 price tag it came out in 2014. I mean, you can get it now for as low as $1, which shows you how bad it is. Not to mention the fact that most male or female NPCs in the game have the exact same voice actor. Okay, look, the game concept is pretty cool. I'm surprised this game actually has good reviews on Steam, but it is also Steam where most people will buy something shitty just to leave a positive review. It's kind of funny, but come on, man. For 2014, it's an okay game. For the original price tag, horrible. For the current price tag, bad game. I love spending my time on bad things. Don't look too deep into that. Especially bad movies and games. But this is just painful bad. Not even fun bad. It's okay though, because the next section will bring the video back up a bit. It's rare to find a game that's unique in both story and gameplay. The two games that we have here managed to do exactly that. Starting off with Pepsi Man was released in 1999 on the PlayStation 1. It was a giant market employed by Pepsi to sell more drinks. The idea behind it is pretty simple. You run and you collect Pepsi cans. That's it. Imagine Subway Surfer, but less brain rot and actually has an ending. And I love this game. It's silly, it's fun, it has great music selection and simple controls, and the story starts off before the game. Pepsi Man was originally a scientist named Satoru Shujinku, who accepted the powers of the Holy Pepsi, and on his way to the headquarters of Pepsi, he hears a man crying for help due to his overbearing thirst. He saves him and takes the mantle as the hero, Pepsi Man. And the entire game is that silly. The opening scene is of a lovable man named TV Game Guy. His real name is Mike Butters, and his last performance was in Zombiegeddon. I'm so happy to see him still working. Afterwards, you run towards a delivery man. He tells you that people are rioting. They want Pepsi, but the vending machines are broken, so you have to run there and give the people what they want. Then a firefighter begs you to help a group of people stuck on the roof, and they are dying because the fires and they need Pepsi. Then a military rescue pilot asks you to save people trapped in the desert because they are dying of thirst due to the sun and they need Pepsi, not water, Pepsi. And then a police officer tells you the world needs Pepsi. Okay, you get the gist of the game. You deliver Pepsi to thirsty people. There's really not much to talk about the game besides the fact that it was one of a kind until iPhones came out and the Temple Runs and the Subway Surfers released. But to not include it in this video would be criminal. Next game. I'm gonna attempt to tell you about Subnautica without any spoilers, because I haven't really finished the game yet. It was released in early access in 2014 and had a full release for all consoles in 2018 and had planned a sequel in 2025. The premise of the game is that you crash landed on an alien planet and you are the only survivor. You have hunger and thirst gauge alongside your health bar and oxygen. The entire planet is made out of water. Your missions come in based on radio messages left by other survivors. However, you learn that these messages are very old, left even as far as 10 years ago. And as someone who is terrified of water and deep sea, every time I dove, I was having a lot of anxiety, and I rarely ever feel fear in video games. I played a lot of horror, and none of them made me feel this way. They did a great job with the design of the game. I found myself swimming and seeing there's a floor underneath me, only to go up for oxygen and diving down again and seeing a giant hole under me. Not to mention the sound design. I played Death in the Water 2 a while ago on my Twitch channel, and I recall that every sound that was made when bumping into stuff was the same. But in Subnautica, they went above and beyond to make being underwater sound terrifying. I should mention, Subnautica is not a horror game. It's labeled as an action-adventure survivor game. It's just a horror game for me. Despite that, I kept playing it and plan on continuing to play it because I didn't want the game that's as well made as this left without experiencing it. The game also features a day and night cycle that happened very quickly. Diving at night makes the game feel worse. I spent most of my time exploring during the day and avoided the night sky. Not to mention that the game is well received, and as an indie game, it won Fan Favorite Games Choice Award and PC Game of the Year from Golden Joystick and Breakthrough Game Award. It was also nominated for 7 more awards. That's the thing I love about Pepsi Man and Subnautica, is that they are both unique in their gameplay and story. You could argue Subway Surfers and Temple Run, but at this point, I can't play those games without brain rot AI reading Reddit stories to me. Next game. Our final unique game that offers a fantastic story and an even better mechanic to its gameplay is Killer Frequency. Released in 2023, it features 80s retro aesthetics, and I love those. The year is 1987. You're controlling a radio host DJ who was fired from his massive show in Chicago that was the home of millions of listeners, to becoming a has-been host to a whopping 35. Forrest Natch hate Gallows Creek, despite the fact he lost his job and has nowhere to go but remained the host of 189.16 The Scream. His producer and co-host Peggy Weaver remains in her locked room the entire time without being able to see her face. It's very reminiscent of Firewatch. You receive a phone call from Leslie, a police officer that informs you that the police station has been attacked, and she has to go across town to call for backup due to their phone lines being tampered with. This is where she tells you that you are now the temporary 911 operator. You'll answer calls from people, help them make choices, and every choice matters. You could potentially lose every single person you get a phone call from. The game allows you some prep time, where you can study everything before giving answers. You have to rely on elements inside the radio station. You have a map of the town, some information about the people in the town, and even a map of certain local attractions where someone calls in for help and you have to guide him through the amazing maze. But what is happening in the town? Why is everyone being attacked all of a sudden? Well, this goes back to 1968, where George Barrow took his girlfriend Bean to a party where Teddy Gallows Jr. and Chuck Brody decided to play a prank by dressing up as the Gallow Creek infamous killer, the Whistling Man, and fake stab the participant, Jason Parker. This resulted in everyone splitting up, including George and Bean. Teddy followed George to the cliffside until he had nowhere to go. Out of fear, he stumbled backwards and Teddy tried to grab him before he fell. However, George met his fate at the bottom of the cliff, landing on his head. Several hours later, the body was found by Sandra Sharp, but there was a cover-up. Turns out that Teddy Gallows Sr. was behind it. He didn't want his son to go to prison, so he paid who he needed to pay, but someone knew the truth. At the end of the game, you are confronted by the Whistling Man, who also happens to be George's girlfriend, Marie Campbell. And honestly, for this final stretch, you figure out the full story. Marie was pregnant before George died. She told her son Henry everything, and they went on a rampage the night of his death as revenge. They went after every single person that attended that party and every single person that covered up the story. And you are confronted with one final save. You can actually play the smart and save Teddy Jr., even though he does not deserve it at all. Throughout the night, you will receive phone calls from Teddy promoting his campaign to be mayor, and he just sucks. He doesn't believe that what his dad did was wrong. He used his money and influence as he should, so you can just let him die, or let him live. Killer Frequency is a beautifully crafted indie gem. From the story, to the voice acting, to the game mechanic, the puzzles are difficult but not impossible. The tension you feel while you're outside the radio room is immense. There's no background music, it's dark and silent, and no Peggy voice to keep you sane. If you have not played it, then I highly recommend it. I played it multiple times. You can save everyone. I tried saving everyone and failed to save everyone. It's an extremely enjoyable game, and I think you should give it a shot. Okay, final section, online games. The first ever online multiplayer game was Islands of Kisame, released in 1984 as a role-playing game. And since then, there have been many online multiplayers across every genre. Platformers, first-person shooters, horror, strategy turn-based, any genre you enjoy playing, it probably has a game with an online feature. But for this section, we're gonna focus on a couple, starting off with Chivalry was released in 2012, but I was never able to play it because I was too ingrained in Call of Duty and Battlefield to focus on any other multiplayer game. But in 2021, Chivalry 2 released, and it is the most fun I've had hacking and slashing and bashing people's heads in with boulders. The premise of the game is simple. You load into a medieval large-scale map, you pick your class from an archer to a footman to knight to vanguard, each equipped with different weapons with different ranges, and each class has sub-levels to unlock more weapons and different playstyles. There are different game modes to play, but the most fun is 32 versus 32 objective based ones. But of course, you can 1v1 or 3v3, although most fights, if not all of them, end up in a one large scale of gangfest where you try to block attacks from every direction. There is also lore in this game, and it started off with Agatha and the Masons. King Aegon the First had defeated and unified kingdoms and ruled over them. However, he fell in battle when a crusade was declared against a sandy land in the south, leaving behind his kingdom and his legacy. Then, King Fedrid Kieran took the leadership of Agatha, which led to his death by the Masons, and that resulted in their ruling for 20 years. Aegon II revealed himself to the world when the Agathan Royal Council, comprised of 7 noblemen, decided to launch a war against the Masons to return Agatha to its former glory. You could say they wanted to make Agatha great again. Sorry. Anyway, Aegon II led the effort of the war and successfully defeated the Masons, and I love seeing people in the game chat role-playing their characters based on which side they play. There is also Tunisia, which was the land where Aegon I died in, that resulted in the civil war between Masons and Agatha. But now Tunisia is throwing its hat in the ring, and neither Masons or Agatha are alone in this rat race. I've had my fair frustrations with the game as well. The servers are a massive problem sometimes, which will result in you swinging wildly for a while just to not land a hit, but somehow get hit and not be able to block it. The game also forces a longer spawn time, or spawns you further from the objective to allow the attacking team to push forward, which I don't have an issue with, but it is frustrating when your team is doing well and the reward for that is to give the enemy such an advantage that the game feels one-sided. Maybe it's a skill issue, or maybe I shouldn't die, but I don't like something when it doesn't make sense, because even if you aren't doing well, the game will still spawn you further back just because you're on the defendant side, and I feel like the balance should be more towards the team that is struggling, not based on what side you're on. And finally, the fact no one likes archers, so if you ever decide to play an archer, just prepare for your own team to hit or even kill you because you chose to play something you enjoy. Despite all of that, the game is super fun to play. I can deal with the frustrations because those moments are fewer than the fun, silly moments. I mean, what other game out there lets you pick up a giant rock and throw it at someone at full velocity? Next game. Player versus environment is not a new concept. Technically, most MMORPGs are exactly that. Some games like Escape from Tarkov fit this category. However, there are some that released in the recent 5 years that are becoming more popular today. Notable ones like Dark and Darker and Hunt Showdown. Both I played during their early stages and saw the improvements and how the developers reacted to feedback. I will give leeway toward Dark and Darker since it was released only a year ago from this video, so they are still actively working on improving both the user experience and ways for them to make money since the game is free. On that version of the game, you have access to one character, allowing you to pick from a pool of 10 classes like Rogue, Cleric, Wizard, or a Bard. They had an in-game DLC when it was released that allows you to create multiple characters, have a shared loot among them, and even give you access to the trading system where you can trade and sell to other players. They did release this DLC to Steam in December of 2024, which has a lot of negative reviews, not related to the quality of the DLC. Though I'm not a fan of the fact that if you don't own the DLC, you will only have access to one character, and the game does not save any progress you make with a specific class. So if you choose a cleric and reach a high level, while not being able to afford the DLC, you won't be able to try a different class without losing the cleric. They also released this DLC on Epic Games for free, and that's where the negative reviews are coming from. People feel scammed for trying to support them on Steam only for it to be gifted as a Christmas present on Epic. Outside of this behavior, the game does feel slow in terms of combat and exploration, but it does allow you to experience something new even if you are low level. They offer a limit to your gear when you are searching for a dungeon to explore, which means that most players in the same lobby won't have much of an advantage unless you count experience as an advantage. Some players who have been playing the game for a long time could easily enter low-level dungeons and focus on killing new players, but that's not fault of the game at all. Though the different classes offer a new playstyle every dungeon run, I found the most success with the Knight after I bought too much armor and felt safe. I also played the Bard and just played music whenever I got the chance, so I enjoyed the simple moments I created for myself while running away from spiders. Since the game is free, I honestly recommend it as a starter for PvPvE, but the game that I really have a lot of skill issue with is Hunt Showdown, which is the most stressful game I ever played. There's no Omni movement to save me, so I have to hope that the other player's aim is terrible. The game was released in early access in 2018, and I have to give credit to the developers for listening to feedback until their launch day, but also talk about how horrible the user interface was after the release. It's somewhat fixed now, although I do find it frustrating with the pop-ups for their new DLCs, the fact I have to scroll past a certain page to be able to pick the game mode I want, and if I'm in a party on a selected game mode, I have to exit the party, select the new game mode I want to play, and re-invite whoever was in my party. The reason why I find this game stressful is because it's a one-life situation. Yes, you could revive your teammate, but for solo players, there wasn't anything to help until the release of Necromancer in 1.12 update to allow you to revive yourself. But if you want this perk, then you have to play with the character and earn enough points to purchase the perk, which means you will have to get in the game and extract successfully. And you can't really get this perk on a random free hunter unless you hire a paid hunter and then remove some of the perk and hope it's enough points for the trait. Apart from that, there are 4 maps in the game. Each have a different time of day and weather, so in total, it's a 24 variant from day and night in clear or foggy weather. I do believe that only 2 maps active at the moment, but the game is supposed to have 4. You can choose to play this game in your own style, whether to be aggressive or passive, rush enemies while they're killing the boss, or bide your time nearby until they're cleansing. You could also wait near an extraction point, but if you manage to pick up a token from the defeated boss, nearby players will be highlighted in orange as you use the dark sight. The sight is a way for you to find clues, because you are still a hunter sent out on a job, so you could also just ignore the other players and focus on taking out monsters and extract. While that is a viable option, not every player will respect the idea even if you communicate it. My main issue with the game like Hunt is the fact that dying is costly. I don't have a lot of in-game currency. What I have is used for getting equipment and weapons. The free hunters are a decent option, but you still need vitality shots for a quick heal during combat, and those 80 hunt dollars stack up pretty quickly. However, when every weapon, item, hunter for hire, ammo type, and weapon variant cost you from the same money pool, you can see how you might not have a fully stacked inventory every run. While I understand that sometimes you don't need everything, if I run into a 6-star with poison bullets and I didn't want to pay $30 for the antidote or just didn't have the money, you can see how annoying that might be. I think it's 100% requirement to be at least decent at the game. There is a solo game mode where you can go against other solo players with a randomized class setup and find items and equipment around the map, but you only get to keep your earnings if you survive, so you don't really lose anything. And you can use this game mode to figure out your footing in the game and your own playstyle. It does have a massive learning curve, not just against monsters in the game, but also specifically the guns. Considering all the guns are old-timey, you need to learn how they shoot, how fast they shoot, if you should aim in during combat or aim out between shots. If you are decent at recognizing maps, learning that you shouldn't shoot an emulation at close range, then learning the guns will be equally important. The game is not terrible. I know my tone might not have delivered that fact, but it's a well-made game. The lore of it is extensive, the monsters are well-made, the bosses have a degree of difficulty but still possible to defeat if you are solo, the maps are decent from size to spawning point, and there's a lot of Easter eggs and references embedded in them. It's also very rewarding when you do well against other players. It's a hit of dopamine I never got from any other game. I dabbled in Call of Duty and Rainbow Six Siege for years, but never felt the excitement I felt doing well as much as I did in Hunt. I believe at some point that Hunt Showdown will be at the pinnacle of most extraction shooters or PvPvE. It deserves its success and praise, but please, fix your UI. Next game. I'm not a fan of 5v5 style of games. I dabbled in Valorant and CSGO, but when Overwatch came out, I didn't bother trying it since I figured it's solely based on playing off each other's characters. And that's not a bad thing, it's just sometimes I want to focus on my own enjoyment without worrying about needing a healer on the team or a tank. So since I didn't want to dip my toes in the genre, I watched its downfall and questioned its decision making. I can't talk shit about the game more than its own player base. It was created by Blizzard, and the first game was actually well received. I've seen so many people praise the original Overwatch for its groundbreaking gameplay and ideas. So if they continued on the same path, updated their game, then Overwatch 2 wouldn't exist and wouldn't have over 300,000 mostly negative reviews on Steam. And I would take those Steam reviews with a grain of salt, especially with the fact that it's a free game, so it wouldn't be difficult to add it, play it for a bit, and leave a negative review since now it has a competitor that has taken its entire player base. When Marvel Rivals came out, I've started to enjoy the style of multiplayer games quite a lot. I love playing Jeff the dog, yes, I know it's a shark, and just heal people or spit on enemies for fun. Despite the fact it's frustrating no one protects the healer, I mean, how dare you, look how adorable he is, I still enjoy getting a beat down from Iron Fist. It's a rite of passage for every Iron Fist to go after the healers, but I also enjoy playing DPS or even a tank. The learning curve for the game is much easier than I anticipated. Each character varies dependent on how you want to play. The first match I played, I was playing the Punisher because he's one of my favorite, and the learning curve for him is non-existent. You aim and you shoot and that's about it. But when I tried to play Loki, it was much more difficult to figure out what he does and what his abilities are and how it works, but it wasn't impossible to figure it out. Overwatch is bleeding players as we speak, and no one is coming to the rescue. Marvel Rivals has more updates coming, more characters releasing, and the fact that it has over 600,000 players and hit its peak in a month's time shows that it has a lot more to go. It's a free game, has a massive IP to pull characters from, and it's a good introduction to fans of Marvel who never played this type of video games before. It has a good tutorial and explanation in case you need to learn about certain characters, who they team up with, and what their abilities are. Maps and game modes are fairly easy to understand. The only difficult learning curve is character and aiming if you're new to games in general. And if you play Iron Fist, you know what to do when you see a healer, unless it's Jeff. Before we get to the conclusion of the video, here are some honorable mentions from games that offer new fresh stories, mechanic, or has a good online feature. Raw Danger, or better known in Japan as Zettai Zetsumi Tushi, or Disaster Report series, was released in 2006 in Japan and in 2007 worldwide. The entire series focuses on surviving natural occurrences, from earthquakes to tsunamis to flooding. The game has a fantastic sound design, great music selection, and multiple characters following their own storylines. I also enjoyed the healing factor of the game that requires you to warm up your body or drying the clothes that you have or wearing different articles of clothing. I also enjoyed the character development and the multiple endings it has for each different character. The developer of the game designed the series after he witnessed an earthquake that took the lives of many of his family and friends' loved ones. I plan on dedicating an entire video to the whole series, so if you are able to try any of the 4 games released, then I definitely recommend it. Both Portal games were released by Valve, and they both offer an insane concept. You are a test subject forced to do multiple puzzles to earn your freedom. I don't know how to explain how the portal gun works, but you have one that doesn't shatter your atoms when you walk through it. This gun alone sparked a massive amount of debate among people on what you can do with it. Also, a lot of Rule 34 art. Don't look it up, but you should look up the story of Doug Radman and always remember that the cake is a lie. Firewatch is a solid one-sitting game. It's one of those games that will make you appreciate life a little bit more. You play as Henry, a man who took a job as a fire lookout due to his wife's early onset dementia. The game does a good job at building tension for certain moments and keeps a mystery alive despite the fact that it's a linear story. You won't miss any of it even if you don't pay full attention. Plus, it's quite a simple game with simple controls. It's here to tell a story, and it's an incredible story that deserves your time. Papers, Please revolves around the idea of border patrol. Everything about the game is fictional, but it does require a lot of attention to detail. From the image of the passport, to the name, to the fingerprint, you need to be careful who you allow in the country of Arstotzka. You are the first line of defense, but you can also take bribes in order for you to earn money, because that is the purpose behind your own character, to get money. The game is well received, of course, and it is an indie game, so you should definitely give it a shot. Bodycam was released in 2024 and by an indie team. Now, I'm not a fan of the movement of the game because it does turn my stomach, but it does feel very realistic for a first-person shooter. The gun gunplay is realistic, the audio design is great, the animations are also well made. However, the thing I've heard complaints about is the matchmaking system. It's almost like every multiplayer game has issues with it, but if you are looking for a more realistic shooter, then I'd recommend giving Bodycam a shot. In Phasmophobia, you are tasked to cleanse a house of ghosts, or demons, or spirit, or so many other options. The way to do it is by going in and gathering enough evidence to determine the type of ghost. The better you do and the more evidence you gather and the more accurate you are will earn you more money, which will allow you better equipments for future runs. Not every house you get into requires the same equipment, so doing well is highly recommended. The game is also an online co-op, so if you ever want to get away from massive multiplayer games and just focus on online co-op games, then Phasmophobia is a good one to pick. Lethal Company deserves its success. I can be a hater towards a lot of popular games. That's just cause I like being a certified hater. But this is something I can't hate on no matter what. The idea of the game is fantastic. You're tasked to gather scrap and sell it while avoiding anomalies, traps, and anything that could kill you. The greatest decision they ever made was to allow mods to be implemented into the game. It made the player base enjoy their game more, have more members in the party, and create unforgettable memes. And I have to admit that the mimic that exists in the game is probably the most terrifying thing I've seen in recent years. The fact that it copies your voice or your friend's voice, and even what they look like, makes the game amazing. So if you haven't really played it, then you definitely should. Outside of the scope of video games, movies, and books, there are many things to try in life. When I was younger, I had a massive catalog of games on the PlayStation 2. So because of that, every game I played felt brand new. But it put me in a bubble of the same style of games. And then it became the same bubble for so many things in life. When it came to food, drinks, meeting new people, refusing anything just because I think I wouldn't like it. So for 2025, I intend to try something new every month. Learn a new skill, experience a new game, go for things even if I think I won't like it. So in case you want to join me on this journey, I'll probably be doing it on a live stream over on Twitch. So feel free to hop on there and don't forget to like and subscribe.